Okay, let's unpack this. Think about the leaders you've encountered in your life. Some you followed because, well, they held the position, right? The power.
Yeah.
Others you followed because you genuinely wanted to. You felt drawn to their leadership somehow.
Hmm.
What was the fundamental difference between those two types? We often jump to things like, charisma or even just raw competence.
Fair, the obvious stuff.
But the source material for this deep dive suggests something maybe far less glamorous, but perhaps far more powerful.
That's right. We're taking a deep dive into an article from Phoenix Performance Partners titled Building Trust Through Consistency. And it argues that the real underlying factor that builds that lasting leadership trust isn't the flash. It's consistency.
Trust is built with consistency. That's the quote from Lincoln Chafee the article uses right at the start. And it feels incredibly simple, doesn't it?
Almost too simple, maybe.
But then our source immediately introduces this interesting paradox. In a world that feels like it's changing faster than ever, where agility and adaptability are huge buzzwords, focusing on consistency can sometimes feel like advocating for rigidity, for being stuck in your ways.
And that's exactly where many leaders get tripped up, I think. They equate consistency with inflexibility. They worry it'll hinder their ability to navigate, complex, rapidly changing environments.
Yeah, I can see that.
But this article really helps us see that true consistency is something quite different.
Absolutely. So our mission for this dive is to really pull apart that idea.
Mm,
We want to understand what true consistency looks like in leadership, explore the real problems that pop up when it's missing,
mhm.
break down the key components that build it, and then look at really practical steps you can start taking, like today, to cultivate it.
Because ultimately, this isn't about theoretical concepts. It's about the daily lived experience of being led, isn't it?
Spot on. So let's jump into that paradox you mentioned. Consistency versus rigidity. How does the article clarify that crucial distinction?
Well, it makes a really important point. True consistency isn't about repeating the exact same action every single time, regardless of the context.
All right, that would be rigid.
Exactly. But probably pretty ineffective in a dynamic world.
Hmm.
Instead, the source suggests consistency is about being the same person.
Okay.
It's about having stable core values, a predictable approach to problems and people, a reliable emotional baseline, essentially, kind of a stable operating system for your leadership.
Ah, okay. An operating system. I like that analogy.
Yeah, so your specific actions, the applications, maybe they might need to adapt to the situation,
Hmm.
but the fundamental your integrity, your values, how you handle pressure, that remains reliably stable.
Okay. So it's not about doing the same thing. It's about being the same person. That makes sense. And that links back to something else the article touches on, referencing a previous piece called You Don't Trust Me.
Mhm.
It reinforces this idea that trust isn't built through like one-off grand gestures or achieving perfect results every single time.
Precisely. Trust emerges from the small, daily alignment between what you say you'll do, your intentions, and your actual behaviors. When you are consistent, your team can, well, they can predict you.
Predict you. How so?
They know generally how you'll react, how you'll communicate, how you'll make decisions, whether you'll follow through on your word. When they have that predictability, they don't have to spend all this mental energy constantly trying to figure you out.
Right, deciphering the leader of the day.
Exactly. They can focus that energy on their work, on the results.
And that's huge because we've all seen, or maybe even been, leaders who are technically competent, brilliant even, with genuinely good intentions,
Sure.
but their teams still seem hesitant. Maybe they walk on eggshells, or there's just this, I don't know, this pervasive sense of unease.
Yeah.
The article points out that the problem often isn't their skill or their fundamental character, it's this underlying inconsistency.
The examples the source uses are really relatable, aren't they? Like the leader who constantly talks about the importance of work-life balance, maybe champions flexible policies, talks about recharging,
Yeah, sounds good.
but then sends urgent emails requiring immediate action late at night or on weekends or when people are clearly on vacation. Their words say one thing.
But their actions scream the opposite. Ouch!
Exactly. Or the leader who preaches total transparency and open communication.
We've all heard that one.
Then, the team finds out crucial information was clearly withheld or filtered, or decisions were made behind closed doors without the input they were promised.
Right. In those situations, there's this constant disconnect. Your team never quite knows which version of the leader they're going to get today.
Is it work-life balance day or midnight email day?
Is it Transparency Tuesday or Filtered Info Friday? It's exhausting.
It really is.
And the article gives a fantastic name to the consequence of this unpredictability: leadership whiplash. Can you describe what that actually feels like for a team?
Oh, it's that jarring, disorienting experience. You're constantly having to adjust because you just don't know what's coming next from your leader.
Whiplash. Yeah, that feels right.
So instead of directing their energy towards achieving goals, team members are forced to spend significant mental resources just reading the situation, trying to anticipate the leader's mood or reaction, trying to figure out the implicit rules of engagement for this specific moment. Is
Yeah.
an enormous drain.
That mental overhead must be absolutely exhausting. It just chips away at focus, creativity, getting the job done.
Have fun.
And the article is very clear. Consistency eliminates that wasted energy,
Yeah.
and it builds psychological safety. Why is that link so crucial for high performance?
Well, psychological safety is essentially the belief that you won't get punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, even mistakes.
Okay.
It's really the foundation for healthy, innovative teams. And consistency in leadership is a key ingredient because when team members can predict their leaders' reactions, their communication style, their follow-through, basically when the ground under their feet feels stable, they feel safe to take risks. They
Oh.
feel safe to share that unconventional idea or ask what might feel like a stupid question. Or, and this is crucial, deliver bad news without fearing some unpredictable or, disproportionate emotional outburst.
So it's not just about making people feel nice or comfortable. It's actually a prerequisite for teams to perform at their highest level. Innovation requires risk, and risk requires safety.
Exactly. And to help leaders understand where they might need to focus their efforts, the article breaks down consistency into 4 key pillars. It gives us a framework to kind of assess ourselves.
Okay, good. Let's look at those. What's the first pillar?
The first is emotional consistency. Now, this is absolutely not about being emotionless or robotic. That's not it at all.
Right, not about suppressing everything.
No. It's about your team having a predictable sense of the emotional climate when they interact with you. It means managing your emotions consciously rather than being managed by them.
So showing up with a stable, appropriate emotional state, generally the same from day to day or situation to situation.
Exactly. Regardless of, external factors like whether you spilled coffee that morning or had a frustrating phone call right before a meeting, your internal state shouldn't cause wild swings in how you treat people.
Right. So if a leader is prone to those wild emotional swings, totally calm and rational about feedback one day, and then exploding over a minor issue the next, that creates intense unpredictability and stress.
Huge stress. Emotional consistency builds that sense of safety about approaching you. People know what to generally expect.
Makes sense. What's the second pillar?
The second is values consistency. This is where your stated values, the things you say you believe in and stand for, actually align with your lived values, your
Yeah.
actions, especially when you're under pressure.
Under pressure, that's the key, isn't it?
The article emphasizes that credibility is often gained or lost right there in those moments. It's easy to say you value integrity or collaboration or fairness when things are going smoothly. But when there's a tight deadline, a significant challenge, a difficult client, a tough ethical dilemma, do your actions still reflect those values you talk about?
That's the real test. Do you compromise your stated principles when it becomes difficult or costly to uphold them? Your team is absolutely watching that. If your values seem situational, well, trust erodes fast.
It really does. Okay, the third pillar is communication consistency. This is about predictability in how and when you communicate important information, feedback, or expectations.
How and when?
Yeah. Having a reliable process builds psychological safety because people know what to expect. They aren't left in the dark or constantly guessing. It could be consistently scheduled team updates, maybe a predictable method for giving feedback, clear guidelines on how you share project status.
And that directly reduces that leadership whiplash we talked about earlier. If I know our weekly check-in always happens on Monday morning and follows a specific format, I can prepare. I know what's coming. But if information just drips out randomly, or feedback arrives via, I don't know, unpredictable ambushes or passive aggression, that's incredibly draining.
Exactly. Communication consistency brings structure and trust to the whole flow of information.
Got it. And the fourth pillar.
The fourth pillar is commitment consistency. This is about honoring your commitments. And the article highlights that this includes both explicit promises and, importantly, implicit expectations.
Okay, explicit is straightforward. I'll get you that report by Friday.
Right. Consistency means doing that, or, and this is key, proactively communicating well in advance if circumstances mean you can't, not just dropping the ball.
Okay. But implicit expectations, those sound maybe harder to track, but just as important, you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you consistently respond to urgent messages within, say, an hour, your team develops an implicit expectation that you're highly responsive, even if you never explicitly wrote that down as a rule.
Ah, okay. It's the patterns you set.
Exactly. Consistency means honoring those patterns you've established, or, again, clearly communicating if and when a change in expectation is necessary. It's about managing expectations reliably, whether those expectations were explicitly set out loud or implicitly built up over time through your actions.
Okay, so we have the 4 pillars: emotional, values, communication, and commitment consistency. But let's circle back to that initial paradox, that tension. How do you balance this focus on consistency with the very real need for agility, for flexibility in a fast-changing world? It still feels like a genuine conflict for a lot of leaders.
And the source addresses this head-on. It suggests it's often a fundamental misunderstanding of what true consistency actually is.
Yeah, we discussed.
Consistency isn't about inflexible action.
Right, the operating system analogy.
Exactly. It's about reliability in your core approach to leadership.
Yeah.
Your operating system, even as the applications you run on that system, the specific actions, change based on context.
So consistency is the stable foundation,
Yeah.
your values, your integrity, your fundamental way of engaging with challenges and people. That stays solid.
Right. That core operating system remains stable and predictable. But the applications, the specific strategies you employ, the decisions you make, the tactics you use to respond to a particular market shift or specific client, can and absolutely should be agile and change based on the circumstances.
So the team needs to know who you are as a leader and how you'll fundamentally operate, even when the situation demands a completely different tactical response than maybe it did last week.
Precisely. They trust the how even when the what changes.
That's a fantastic distinction, really helpful. It means you can be consistently grounded in your principles while still being agile and adaptable in your strategy and actions. It's not an either.
Not at all. And the article provides some really practical, tangible ways to build this consistency into your daily practice. It moves beyond the abstract concept to specific behaviors you can adopt.
Okay, like what? Give us some examples.
Well, like starting your day with, say, morning intention setting. Simply taking a minute to decide how you want to show up as a leader in terms of your consistency for that specific day.
Just setting that intention. Simple but powerful.
Yes. Or establishing clear response time standards. Maybe stating clearly how quickly people can expect responses from you via email or Slack or whatever, and then consistently adhering to those standards. It removes the guesswork for your team.
Developing a clear, predictable decision framework is another one the source mentions. This doesn't mean you always make the same decisions,
Right.
but you use a consistent process for making decisions, especially important ones. Letting your team understand how you'll arrive at a conclusion helps them trust the process, feel secure, even if the outcome isn't exactly what they hoped for.
And scheduling regular check-ins. Just establishing consistent rhythms for connecting with your team or individual members. It builds predictability into your availability and ensures information flows regularly.
These are great daily practices. The source also highlights that consistency is perhaps most critical in difficult moments, right? Because that's when the temptation to deviate or react impulsively is highest.
Absolutely. And it's also when your team is most likely to be watching closely, looking for cues about who you really are under pressure.
So what are some examples for consistency in those tough times?
Things like consistently taking a conscious pause before responding when you're feeling under pressure or you've just received challenging news. It's a consistent practice of self-regulation, stopping that knee-jerk reaction.
Okay, the pause. What else?
Developing a standard approach for sharing difficult information. Having a reliable, predictable method or process for how you deliver bad news or address sensitive topics rather than just, winging it differently each time based on your mood.
Consistency even in delivering bad news. That builds trust too.
Definitely. And using the same basic method for addressing conflicts. Approaching disagreements or interpersonal issues with a consistent framework, maybe for listening, mediating, resolving, rather than reacting completely differently every time a conflict pops up.
And finally, the article mentions being consistent in how you acknowledge both successes and failures.
Yes. Celebrating wins and addressing shortcomings or mistakes with a predictable, fair, and constructive approach. Not glossing over failures or blaming inconsistently.
Okay, so when a leader consciously cultivates this kind of consistency across these areas in daily practice, and especially in those difficult moments, the article describes a powerful ripple effect. It really transforms the team dynamic.
Yeah, it outlines several positive dynamics that emerge.
What's the first ripple effect mentioned?
The first is that psychological safety significantly increases.
Hmm.
We talked about this. When the leader is predictable and reliable, people feel much safer taking interpersonal risks,
Speaking up, sharing ideas.
sharing unconventional ideas, asking questions, and yes, bringing forward bad news because they trust they won't face an unpredictable or overly punitive reaction. The fear factor decreases.
And with increased safety comes better decision quality. That's the second one.
Yes. When your team understands your values, your decision framework, your overall predictable operating system, they're better equipped to make good decisions themselves, even when you're not directly involved. They know what aligns with your core approach.
Right, they can anticipate and act accordingly, less hesitation, more informed action. The third effect is that stress decreases.
Oh, this is a big one. A huge source of workplace stress is unpredictable leadership. Just not knowing what to expect from your boss creates constant background anxiety.
Walking on eggshells feeling.
Exactly. When leadership becomes a stable, reliable force, that baseline stress level for the whole team just drops dramatically. People can relax a bit and focus.
Absolutely. And finally, the fourth ripple effect. Innovation accelerates.
Right. Because when the foundation feels secure, people trust their leader, they feel safe, stress is reduced, they feel more confident and comfortable experimenting, trying new approaches, pushing creative boundaries.
They aren't worried that a failed experiment will lead to some unpredictable backlash.
Exactly. Because they trust the consistency of their leader's response to challenges, even failures, as long as they're learning experiences.
So consistency isn't just about being orderly or neat, it's truly foundational for creating high-performing, psychologically safe, and innovative environments.
Wow. Which brings us very neatly to the practical your next step challenge that the article poses directly to you, the listener.
Okay, this is where it gets really actionable. The article encourages you to pause and honestly rate yourself, maybe later today, on a 1 to 10 scale for each of the four pillars we just discussed.
That's emotional consistency, values consistency, communication consistency, and commitment consistency.
Take a moment, reflect honestly. Where are you consistently predictable and reliable in your leadership? And be honest, where are you maybe less so? Where could you improve?
The source notes, well, this is just a simple self-assessment. If your total score across those four pillars adds up to below 32.
Out of a possible 40.
Right. It might be a strong indicator that inconsistency is subtly but significantly undermining your effectiveness as a leader, potentially in ways you might not fully realize.
It's just a useful flag, something to pay attention to.
Definitely. And the core challenge the article proposes for this week, your one practical step, is to choose just one specific area from those four pillars where you will consciously focus on improving your consistency.
Just pick one. Don't try to boil the ocean here.
No, absolutely not. The article suggests starting small, maybe using one of the examples of daily practices we talked about earlier.
Like maybe committing to responding to emails within a specific time frame you set for yourself and really sticking to it rigidly this week. Just that one thing.
Or maybe it's ensuring you start every single team meeting this week with the exact same brief check-in format, just to build that communication predictability.
Or perhaps it's a commitment to practice that conscious pause every single time you feel that pressure building before responding in a difficult moment this week. Just identify that one specific measurable behavior.
The critical takeaway here, as the article really hammers home, is that consistency isn't about being perfect. It's not about flawlessness.
Yeah.
It's about being predictable.
Yeah.
Your team doesn't need you to be some kind of error-free leadership superhero. They need you to be a reliable one. They need to know what to expect from you, fundamentally.
In a world that constantly throws curveballs and feels uncertain, cultivating consistency allows you to be that reliable constant your team can anchor to. It's a profound gift you can give them, really.
So take the challenge. Rate yourself on the four pillars. Pick that one specific behavior to work on this week.
And then just consider this as we wrap up. Think about the potential cumulative power that lies in focusing on just that one single consistency behavior you chose this week. How might that one small, reliable change begin to build significant trust, reduce that whiplash effect, and create a more predictable, safer, and ultimately higher performing environment around you? What could that unlock?